In the quiet of my bedroom, I, Emily Martin, a 36-year-old homemaker, sat reflecting on the years I had spent in this house. The walls, once symbols of love and security, now felt like barriers trapping me in a world of deception and unspoken truths. I had married Michael, a man destined to take over his family's prestigious spa resort. His family's legacy was not just a business. It was a beacon in the hospitality industry, a name synonymous with luxury and exclusivity. Our marriage, initially a fairy tale, began to reveal its cracks when I became pregnant. Michael, always the dutiful son and aspiring business mogul, had little time or patience for the nuances of our growing family. His family's obsession with a male heir to continue the legacy loomed over us like a dark cloud. When I discovered I was pregnant, Michael's reaction was a cocktail of relief and unbridled expectation. "A boy, Emily. We need a boy," he said, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of hope and unspoken pressure. I remember feeling a knot in my stomach, not from the pregnancy, but from the weight of his words. The thought, "What if it's a girl?" haunted my nights, robbing me of my sleep and peace. Throughout my pregnancy, Michael's presence became more phantom-like. His priorities were clear: the resort and its future. My health checkups, the preparations for our child, the emotional roller coaster I was on, I faced them alone. The day we found out we were having a boy should have been a celebration. Instead, it felt like passing an exam, a relief, but not a joy. My successor, Michael had said, a statement more than an expression of affection. His infrequent presence at home was marked by criticisms and reminders of the responsibility I carried. I was more a vessel for the heir than his wife. My health deteriorated under the stress. Morning sickness was my constant companion, often leaving me weak and exhausted. Michael's family upheld a tradition of dining together, a practice Michael insisted on. But as my condition worsened, so did his patience. Dramatic, he called it, dismissing my suffering as an overreaction. The day our son was born was the day my illusion shattered completely. I lay there, exhausted yet elated, holding our baby, a beautiful boy with Michael's eyes. Michael stood there, not with warmth, but with a sense of accomplishment. He did not reach for my hand or share a tear of joy. He was there, yet he wasn't. The first time he held our son, his touch was tentative, as if he was holding his future rather than his flesh and blood. That night, as I lay in the hospital bed, cradling our son, Michael dropped the bombshell. "Emily, now that the heir is born, your role is fulfilled. I think it's best if you leave. We can't afford a freeloader." His words, cold and calculated, hit me like a physical blow. I stared at him, my heart breaking not just for me, but for the innocent life I held in my arms. In that moment, I realized the painful truth. To Michael, I was never a partner, never truly his wife. I was a means to an end, a step in his plan. As I looked into the eyes of our son, I knew I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for him. I would leave, yes, but not as a defeated, discarded wife. I would leave on my terms, with my head held high. Michael had awakened something in me, a strength I didn't know I had. I would ensure that he regretted the day he underestimated Emily Martin. The hospital room felt colder than usual that night. As I lay there, holding my newborn son, the echoes of Michael's harsh words replayed in my mind. Freeloader, he had called me, a term so alien yet so cutting. I looked down at my son, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. In his innocence, I found my resolve. I wouldn't let Michael's cruelty define our lives. The days following were a blur of paperwork, formalities, and silent tears. My parents, unaware of the full extent of my marital strife, were shocked when I showed up at their doorstep, a baby in my arms and a heart full of sorrow. "Mom, Dad, I need some time," I said, my voice barely a whisper. They didn't press for answers, for which I was grateful. That night, as I lay in my old bed, the reality of my situation began to sink in. Michael had not only abandoned me, but also his son. Days turned into weeks. I found solace in the familiarity of my childhood home, the unconditional love of my parents, and the innocent smiles of my son. Yet beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. I couldn't forget Michael's betrayal, nor could I forgive it. His words had ignited a fire within me, a desire to not just survive, but to thrive, and to make him regret his callousness. I started plotting my course of revenge, each plan more meticulous than the last. My days were spent caring for my son, and my nights in strategizing. Michael, in his arrogance, had underestimated me, a mistake I intended to use to my advantage. It wasn't long before I received a frantic call from Michael. His voice, once confident and commanding, was now tinged with desperation. "Emily, please come back. I didn't realize how hard this would be," he pleaded. I listened, a cold smile playing on my lips. Michael, the heir to a luxury resort empire, was crumbling under the weight of responsibilities he had never bothered to share with me. His pleas for help, his admissions of struggle, were music to my ears. This was the man who had reduced me to nothing more than a freeloader, now unable to cope with the reality of his own life. "Michael, we are done," I said firmly, the finality in my voice unmistakable. "You made your choice, and now you must live with it." I hung up, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. I had drawn the first blood in this silent war, and it was both terrifying and liberating. That night, as I held my son, I made a promise to both him and myself. We would not be victims of Michael's cruelty. We would rise from this, stronger and more resilient. Michael had started this war, but I would be the one to end it. The following weeks were a testament to the strength I didn't know I possessed. Each day with my son was a reminder of what truly mattered, and each night, as he slept peacefully, I crafted my plan to ensure Michael paid for his betrayal. His calls became more frequent, each one more desperate than the last, but they only fueled my resolve. Michael's pleas turned into bargaining, then into threats, as he slowly realized I wasn't going to relent. "You can't do this to me, Emily, I need you," he would say. But his words, once capable of swaying me, now fell on deaf ears. I was no longer the woman he thought he could easily discard. I began to reach out to allies, both within and outside of Michael's influential circle. To my surprise, many were appalled by his actions, their sympathy quickly turning into support for my cause. It was as if Michael, in his arrogance, had underestimated not only me, but the relationships I had cultivated over the years. As the days passed, my plans started taking shape. I knew that to win this battle, I needed more than just emotional victories. I needed to secure my and my son's future. Legal consultations, financial planning, and quiet inquiries into Michael's business dealings became part of my daily routine. Then one evening, as I was putting my son to bed, my phone rang. It was Michael again, but this time his tone was different, broken, defeated. "Emily, I can't do this. The baby won't stop crying, and I don't know what to do. Please, come back." I felt a twinge of pity, quickly overshadowed by the memory of his harsh words and colder actions. "You wanted to be a father, Michael. Now you're learning what it means to be one," I replied, my voice steady. I could hear the frustration in his breath, the clenching of his teeth. "I'll do anything, Emily, please." "Anything?" I asked, a plan forming in my mind. "We'll see." That night, as I lay in bed, I realized that my feelings for Michael had completely evaporated, replaced by a cold indifference. The man I once loved was now nothing more than a stranger to me, a stranger I was prepared to stand against. The next morning, I contacted my lawyer to initiate divorce proceedings. I knew it would be a battle, but I was ready to fight for my son, for our future, and for the justice we deserved. Michael had awakened a side of me I never knew existed, and now there was no turning back. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal appointments, strategic planning, and an unwavering focus on my goal. My resolve had turned into a shield, protecting both my son and me from the chaos that Michael had unleashed in our lives. The divorce proceedings were initiated, and with each step, I felt a sense of empowerment growing within me. Michael's attempts to reconcile were relentless, but they only strengthened my determination. He was no longer the confident businessman who had dismissed me so callously. He was now a man grasping at straws, trying to salvage a situation he had created. One particularly poignant moment came when I had to meet Michael for a mediation session. As I sat across from him, I saw a man broken by his own arrogance. He pleaded, bargained, and even broke down, but the image of him standing in the hospital room telling me I was no longer needed remained etched in my mind. "I'll change, Emily. I swear I didn't realize what I had until I lost it," Michael implored. But it was too late. I had seen the true Michael, and there was no going back. "You've already shown me who you are, Michael. I can't unsee that," I replied calmly. As the legal battle ensued, Michael's true nature became public. His inability to manage his personal life started affecting his professional one. The spa resort, his family's legacy, began to feel the strain of his distracted leadership. Then came the day of reckoning. The divorce was finalized, granting me full custody of our son and a substantial alimony settlement. Michael's reaction was one of disbelief and despair. He had lost not just his wife and son, but also a significant portion of his wealth. But the final blow came from his own family. Disappointed by his actions and the negative impact on their business, they decided to remove him from his position at the resort. His fall from grace was not just personal, but professional as well. Michael, once a man of influence and power, was now struggling to find his footing. He tried to reach out, to appeal to my emotions, but I had moved beyond the reach of his words. As I watched Michael's descent, I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. He had underestimated me, treated me as a mere stepping stone in his path. Now, he was paying the price for his arrogance and insensitivity. With my son by my side and a newfound strength within me, I stepped into a future of possibilities. Michael's downfall was not just a victory for me. It was a lesson in resilience and the power of standing up for oneself. The closing of the courtroom door behind me felt like the final note in a long, tumultuous symphony. As I walked away, holding my son's hand, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The battle with Michael was over, and I had emerged not just victorious, but transformed. In the months that followed, I established a new life for myself and my son. We moved into a modest but cozy home, a place where laughter replaced the echoes of past arguments and tears. Each room was filled with the promise of a new beginning, a sanctuary from the storms we had weathered. My days were busy but fulfilling. I re-entered the workforce, finding a job that not only supported us but also brought me a sense of accomplishment and independence. The gap in my resume as a full-time homemaker did pose challenges, but my determination and newly found confidence helped me overcome them. As I watched my son play in our new living room, his giggles a balm to my once weary soul, I realized how much we had both grown. He was no longer the silent witness to a crumbling marriage, but a happy, thriving child, basking in the love and stability of our new life. Michael, on the other hand, became a distant memory, a chapter in my life that was closed and shelved away. The last I heard, he was doing odd jobs, a far cry from the luxurious life he was once accustomed to. His family, having disowned him, no longer provided the financial safety net he had always relied on. There were moments of guilt, fleeting shadows of what was once compassion for the man I married, but they were quickly overshadowed by the memory of his words and actions. Michael was no longer my responsibility, nor my concern. Life had taught me a harsh but valuable lesson: the importance of self-worth. I had learned to stand up for myself, to demand respect and fairness in a relationship. This journey, fraught with pain and betrayal, had led me to a place of strength and peace. My son's laughter brought me back to the present. I joined him on the floor, building a castle out of blocks, each one representing a piece of our new life. As we played, I made a silent promise to him and to myself, to cherish this happiness, to nurture it, and to never let anyone take it away from us again. In this new era of our lives, we had found not just peace, but a deeper, more resilient joy. We were no longer just survivors, we were thriving, building a future filled with hope and endless possibilities.
I can't work at that company. My grandson had left for the induction ceremony, but returned home in just 30 minutes. As a child born premature and frail, he had overcome many hardships and finally landed a job at a major corporation. However, at the ceremony, he encountered the company president's daughter, who had bullied him in middle school. My name is Debbie Hansen. I'm 75 years old. Officially, I'm the chairperson of a company that produces next-generation semiconductor materials. Originally a small-town workshop, this business was started by my late husband. It began as a small factory that produced limited quantities with local craftsmen. But it expanded gradually as we focused on technological innovation and quality improvement, eventually becoming a global corporation providing Next generation semiconductor materials. My husband passed away 5 years ago, and now my son has taken over as the president. Initially, he was reluctant to take the role. I'm better suited to working on the factory floor making parts. I think you'd be better as president, Mom. But I'm already 70 years old, and sooner or later, you'll have to take over. We ended up reluctantly passing the presidency back and forth. I considered promoting someone from our long-serving employees, but they were all craftsmen at heart, and none seemed right for the position. My late husband was also not good at dealing with external affairs. I wonder if being a craftsman runs in the family? Eventually, I took on the position of chairperson to support my son, and he settled into the role of president. Over time, he grew into it and, thanks to his wife's support, he began relying less on me. Nowadays, my pleasures are taking care of our cat and watching my grandson grow. Despite having worked desperately with my husband to expand the business, he left for the afterlife, leaving me behind. You've gotten old too, huh? I reminisce about the past while petting our cat, Loki. It was my grandson, Kevin, who had just started elementary school, who brought Loki home as a kitten. Can I keep it if I take good care of it? He had asked. His parents were hesitant, but my husband and I, being soft on our grandson, agreed. Kevin really took good care of the kitten, and Loki became very attached to him. Kevin was born premature, and it was uncertain if he would grow well due to his small size. We could only watch him from outside the incubator, and prayed that he would grow up without any issues. When he was finally discharged from the hospital, we were overjoyed. Although he was not very robust, often falling ill. Yet, it was adorable to see him going to school with his backpack, despite his small stature. When he wanted to keep the cat he found after school, refusing him was out of the question. He's so small and cute, I said as Kevin held the kitten. Will he grow up okay? Kevin asked worriedly. Of course, you were very small when you were born too, but you grew up just fine. I reassured him. Growing up healthy, that was a wish shared by our whole family. Kevin wasn't very sturdy even after starting elementary school, often catching colds which then turned into bronchitis, causing him to miss school. However, he was very bright. Even when he missed school, he would read textbooks, solve practice problems, and read books at home. Perhaps he enjoyed imagining himself traveling through space, or battling villains in his stories because he couldn't run around outside like other kids. His grades were excellent, almost as if his intelligence compensated for his frail body. Wishing he could be less brilliant and more healthy might have been a luxurious worry. In middle school, Kevin decided he wanted to strengthen his body by joining a sports club. He initially wanted to join the judo club, but we all opposed that, not wanting to see our grandson getting thrown around and coming home bruised. We suggested tennis instead, a more individual-paced sport that wouldn't burden his teammates. Kevin agreed, and my husband and I happily provided him with a racket and shoes. I've been physically weak since I was little and joined this club hoping to get healthier. I might cause some trouble, but please bear with me. Kevin greeted his new club members. The coach, seniors, and other new members were very welcoming. Although Kevin was probably treated a bit like the underdog, everyone except Megan Irving was supportive. Megan was a classmate of Kevin's. According to him, she was the daughter of a company president, did well academically, was good at sports, and always had a group of followers. Ah, she's popular, then? I remarked. No, not really. Those girls just stick around because she treats them to things and gives them presents. She's really awful. Kevin's friend, Sean, commented. Kevin had made friends with Sean in middle school. They were in the same class and both belonged to the tennis club. Unlike Kevin, Sean was tall and robust, the picture of health. Gentle Kevin and outgoing Sean, although different in personality, were very good friends. That girl, Megan, targets Kevin and harasses him. What? Why would she? No one in the family had heard such things from Kevin. He wasn't the type to be disliked or attacked by others. Megan can't beat Kevin in test scores. Sean explained her relentless character. Even so, to harass. She hides his shoes during club activities. Hits tennis balls far away on purpose to make Kevin fetch them. And sometimes pretends to miss and hits her serves directly at him. This was something I couldn't overlook. I'll go to the school and complain. No, maybe I should go directly to her parents. I was furious. Please don't, Grandma. I'm fine, really. If you do that, I'd be too embarrassed to go to school. Kevin stopped me, and I held back, realizing children have their own ways of handling things. The burden of the tennis club. A boy who's good at studies but clumsy in sports is trash. A poor kid from a small-town factory. Apparently, Megan and her group of girls would say such things audibly enough for Kevin to hear, even outside club time. At that time, our family's workshop was still small. Just when next-generation semiconductor materials were starting to gain market demand. The building and factory were still old and small, and from the outside, it might have looked like a poor workshop. But for someone to look down on others just because she's a company president's daughter was unthinkable. Although Kevin asked us to remain silent, it was infuriating. Despite everything, Kevin continued to work hard, occasionally missing club activities due to poor health. But his academic performance remained top of his class. Megan Irving, the president's daughter, was evidently frustrated by this. When Kevin moved to a different class in the second year of middle school, we were relieved. Sean continued to be in the same class, and both Kevin and I were happy. However, Kevin still had to face Megan in the tennis club. Once, when he found his hidden shoes, the laces were all cut. These are important shoes my grandma bought for me. Why would you do something like this? Kevin confronted her. What? You have proof for something? I understand that a pair of shoes is a big deal for a poor person, she sneered back. There was no proof. Perhaps Megan had commanded her followers to do it. It's harder to deal with such an evil-natured person than the harassment itself, Kevin admitted for the first time, sounding defeated. I was worried he might develop a distrust of women because of this. Kevin became classmates with Megan Irving again in third grade, and the harassment in the classroom resumed. Since he was in a different class from Sean. My family and I did not find out about this until much later. Before tests, someone would hide Kevin's notes. During a science experiment, someone broke his equipment, preventing him from proceeding with the experiment. Above all, the backbiting and slander on social media severely hurt Kevin's heart. Some kids spread baseless rumors just for fun, even if they don't mean any harm. Despite this, Kevin continued with the tennis club until his summer retirement, maintaining his grades throughout. However, the stress eventually took its toll, already not the most robust. Kevin fell ill with acute nephritis just before high school entrance exams due to a cold, which forced him into hospitalization. He missed both the exams and his middle school graduation. Our whole family regretted not acting sooner to help him. But Kevin himself seemed surprisingly unaffected. "It's okay. I can take the exam next year. With all this time to study, maybe I'll aim for a higher-ranked school," he said with a laugh. True to his word, Kevin passed the entrance exam for a better high school the following year. He proved to be stronger than I had ever imagined. High school life seemed enjoyable for him. He joined the tennis club again, and even participated in matches, though he mostly lost in the first round. We celebrated his first match win with a family gathering. Although Sean went to a different high school, he remained close with Kevin and came to celebrate with him. Life's so much less stressful without Megan Irving around. "I wanted to punch her when you were hospitalized." Megan had been delighted when Kevin was hospitalized, peeking during the graduation ceremony with taunts like, "You couldn't even take the exam, right? Serves you right, you're definitely a middle school dropout now. It's good you didn't hit her. If that had ruined your chances for further education, I'd have felt even worse." "Yeah, you're right. Sorry. Let's stop talking about her." "Yeah. I don't even want to remember her, and hopefully, we'll never see her again." With that, Kevin's trials seemed to have ended, or so everyone thought. When college application season arrived, Kevin mentioned, "I'm thinking of going to MIT to study engineering. It could help with our family business in the future." The university was renowned for its research in semiconductor technology. "That's great to hear, but remember, you're free to choose whatever path you like." I and the rest of the family insisted. "This is what I love. I want to study semiconductor technology to help expand our factory," Kevin replied, his eyes shining with determination. My husband was bedridden at the time, but hearing this from Kevin brought him great joy. "Our factory is in safe hands," he had said. He passed away before hearing of his college acceptance. But his last days were peaceful, watched over by our family. Kevin thrived in college, even finding a lovely girlfriend through Sean's girlfriend. And they often went on double dates. Recently, he's become much healthier, hardly ever catching colds. In his senior year, I asked him, "Kevin, do you plan to work at our factory right after you graduate? I think it might be better for you to work at another company first, to broaden your experience as a working adult." "Yeah, I've been thinking that too. I'd feel too sheltered if I stayed with the family business right away." Kevin agreed with a laugh. Kevin, always at the top of his class, would likely be welcomed at any company. Then, on a spring morning, he left for the induction ceremony at a well-known electronic components manufacturer in our local area. However, Kevin returned home just 30 minutes after he had left, looking shocked and angry. "Kevin? What happened? What about the induction ceremony?" Surprised by his upset demeanor, I asked. And he silently pulled out a name tag that read something unbelievable. "Middle school dropout incompetent." "What's this? A name tag? Given to me by Ms. Megan Irving." "What?" It turns out she's the daughter of the president of the company I joined. According to Kevin, Megan was now working in the HR department of that company, responsible for managing and training new employees. And it was her duty to distribute name tags. "I was shocked to see your name on the list of new employees. I work in HR here," Megan had said with a smirk, handing over the name tag in an envelope. "Nice to see you again." Hearing that, he said it brought back all the unpleasant memories from middle school in an instant. Everything just went dark when I looked inside the envelope and saw this name tag. I just couldn't bring myself to attend the ceremony. Kevin spoke with evident distress. Was Megan still holding a grudge because Kevin had outperformed her academically? After all the harassment in middle school, which had led to Kevin's illness and delayed his education, the label middle school dropout incompetent was clearly just another act of spite. A look at the employee list would show that Kevin was neither a middle school dropout nor incompetent. Perhaps that was what fueled Megan's jealousy even more. I said I should work at another company for a while. I never imagined such a terrible coincidence. It's not your fault, Grandma. But I can't work at that company. Of course, I thought. Who knows what kind of harassment he would face there? I decided to act immediately, determined not to fail to protect Kevin again. I grabbed my smartphone and called the president of the company Kevin was supposed to join. Hello, Mr. President? Ah, Mrs. Hanson. Thank you for your help. What can I do for you today? My grandson attended your company's induction ceremony earlier. Yes, he joined your company, thank you. Well, about that, he received a name tag from your HR department. That reads middle school dropout incompetent. What? Is this how your company welcomes new employees? If that's the corporate culture at your company, I may need to reconsider our relationship. What? Wait a minute, please. The $35 million contract we discussed the other day, I'm returning it to the drawing board. I stated firmly. The contract involved supplying next-generation semiconductor materials from our company for use in their new products, expected to significantly enhance their competitive edge in the market due to our cutting-edge technology. Surely there must be some mistake. We have no such employees who would do such a thing. Are you suggesting my grandson is lying? No, not at all. We'll investigate immediately. Could you please wait a moment? The name tag was handed out by Ms. Megan Irving from HR, you know? President Irving. What? Before talking about training employees, perhaps you should have corrected your daughter's education first. I could hear the president trying desperately to say something on the other end of the phone. But I unilaterally hung up. Surprise spread across Kevin's eyes. Grandma, you didn't have to do that. I think Kevin was worried that my actions might have jeopardized a $35 million contract. It's okay. There are plenty of other companies that want to do business with us. I will do anything to protect your effort and pride. I made the decision on my own, but I believe Kevin's parents would feel the same way. A few hours later, I received a call from my son at the factory. It seems that President Irving and his daughter Megan Irving had come to visit. I was at home, just behind the factory, so I asked them to come around to the house. I hadn't told my son and his wife about the incident yet. Kevin had gone up to his room, likely not wanting to see Megan's face. I decided to confront President Irving alone. I am truly sorry for what my daughter has done. The president apologized deeply, but his daughter stood by with a sullen attitude, thinking about how this girl had tormented my dear grandson made my anger resurface. Aren't you going to apologize? Prompted by her father. She said with no sincerity, I'm very sorry. May I ask why you did such a thing? It was nothing. I just saw the name of a middle school classmate on the new employee list and wanted to play a little prank. I was astounded she could say such a thing. However, President Irving seemed to believe her. Well, it was a prank, not commendable, but she is reflecting on it, so please, let's proceed with the contract as planned. It was clear she wasn't really reflecting. The president then said, "I understand you love your grandson, but business is a different matter. Besides, I heard that you had retired from the field." It seemed he thought I was making unreasonable demands. Out of affection for my grandson. Understood. May I have a little time to think? I managed to say calmly, though I was thinking of pursuing this thoroughly. Thank you very much. President Irving pleaded and left with his daughter, leaving behind some sweets. Can you believe it? Megan Irving? That night, Sean, who had come to celebrate Kevin's new job, exclaimed in shock. I thought we'd never see her again, but look at this. She hasn't changed at all, still acting like less than a middle schooler. Seeing the name tag handed to Kevin at the induction ceremony, Sean couldn't hide his anger. That president doesn't know what his daughter did back in middle school. Now that it's come to this, I'm determined to take decisive action. I said, and Sean, as I hoped, replied, I'll help too. We need to catch her. No, both of you, it's okay. Don't go overboard because of me. Kevin tried to stop us, but Sean and I said, Kevin, being nice is one of your best traits, but being nice alone won't get you through life. Exactly. If we let this go, who knows who else she might harm? No, she's definitely caused trouble at her company as well. Convinced by us, Kevin seemed to make up his mind. Okay. I have a private web diary from middle school that might serve as evidence. The diary Kevin showed us was a detailed record of those times. It contained even worse incidents than those Sean had told us about. And reading it brought tears to my eyes. I can't forgive her. Sean was shaking with anger. Evidence of Megan Irving's middle school bullying of Kevin quickly accumulated. Testimonies from tennis club members and classmates were gathered by Sean. Even the girls who had been Megan's followers, who secretly disliked her, were now willing to speak openly about the past. Sean diligently recorded their statements on video, along with Kevin's hospital records from the time and the recent name tag incident. As well as Kevin's diary, we had ample evidence. I made an appointment with President Irving and visited the company. Have you reconsidered? Greeted with a smile by the president, I showed him the evidence I had brought. As his face turned pale, I said, These are the actions your daughter took against my grandson during middle school. Because of this, my grandson fell ill and delayed his advancement by a year. The president made an internal call and summoned his daughter to his office. Megan, what have you done? He yelled as she entered the room, looking bewildered. Upon seeing me, she seemed to understand the situation. Is there anything else? Her attitude was defiant to the extreme. Listen. There is evidence of what you did in middle school. What would you do if you were sued? What are you talking about, Dad? Those minor pranks from so long ago are well past the statute of limitations. It appeared that the daughter was more knowledgeable about the law than her father. Indeed, it would be difficult to legally pursue matters after so much time had passed. However, the president's daughter seemed to have forgotten that. I was not just some old lady who came here out of affection for her grandson. Then, we will no longer be doing business with your company. Are you okay with that? I informed him of my decision, and the president slumped in resignation. Subsequently, our company contracted with a competitor of President Irving's company to supply the semiconductor materials we had intended for them. After losing access to our materials, Irving's company turned to foreign materials and faced numerous defects in their products, severely damaging their reputation and causing their stock prices to plummet. Conversely, the company we began supplying received high praise for their new products, marking a stark contrast in fortunes. After this incident, President Irving fired his daughter but, out of parental affection, helped her secure a position at a subcontractor. To make matters worse, an article titled, "Astonishing Daughter of a Major Company's President" was published online. Sean, who now worked at a publishing company, wrote the article using the information gathered during the evidence collection. He obtained permissions from the tennis club members and classmates, and even posted edited videos of their testimonials. While the company and real names were omitted, internet users quickly identified them. The numerous accounts of bullying resonated with others who had suffered similar experiences. The 35 million incident became a topic of discussion among industry insiders, further tarnishing President Irving's company's reputation. Sean continued his investigation, obtaining additional disclosures from people connected to the company where Megan had worked. As I had suspected, she had been a bully at the company as well, exploiting her position in HR and her status as the president's daughter to mistreat colleagues and superiors. This article went viral, and even Megan's photo ended up online. Her new workplace was identified, leading to relentless online attacks. Overwhelmed, her new employer dismissed her. Even Megan, tough as she was, suffered greatly and eventually secluded herself at home. She's supposedly seeing a psychiatrist now. But unless her personality changes, I doubt it'll help. She's planning to flee overseas, but the internet is the same everywhere. Sean told me this after receiving praise from his editor for the article. Only Kevin seemed sympathetic. The internet is scary. It can change a person's fate just like that. What are you talking about? Didn't that woman change your fate too? She got what she deserved. Yeah, maybe. I hope reading that article makes people realize if you do terrible things to others, it comes back to you, and maybe it will reduce the suffering of others who are still experiencing such hardships. Kevin was always kind. His advancement being delayed by a year and his initial employment opportunity disrupted were indeed events that could have derailed his destiny. But Kevin had persevered, attending a higher-ranked high school and finding a new job on his own, despite my offer to introduce him to related companies. The company I ended up joining is smaller than the one I initially had, but the president is very passionate. It's a great place, he said, his eyes sparkling. Today, we were set to celebrate Kevin's employment again. This time with his girlfriend and Sean's girlfriend at a fancy French restaurant I had booked, saying, "You're working now, so it's an experience to celebrate at a nice place." As Kevin headed out, I called out to him, "No matter the hardships or challenges, overcoming them with your own efforts. Kevin, I'm proud of you." Kevin turned around and smiled shyly. "I'm remarrying with my new bride. Thanks for everything so far," Jim said with a cheerful laugh. Standing next to him, my mother-in-law also added with a full smile, "You should get a divorce and leave. It seems decided between Jim and my mother-in-law to welcome his mistress as his new wife. I guess I'm being ousted. But I'm not worried. I knew this would happen sooner or later. Jim is smitten with his mistress, and his parents' house has fully accepted her. But of course, I haven't just been sitting quietly. I prepared a surprise for when this would happen." "Well then, Jim. Are you ready? My name is Sherry Johnson. I'm 35 years old. I married Jim when I was 27. We currently live together in an apartment. Let's have children when we have a bit more room in our budget. Years have passed since he said that. Before I knew it, both Jim and I are getting on in years. I want to finally have children. Just as I was thinking this, I sensed that Jim was cheating. Jim was never good at lying. I have overtime work today. That has become his recent excuse. But it's obvious it's a lie when you look at the payroll slips. On his days off, he hurries out alone. Could he be cheating? I thought immediately. But somewhere in my heart, I still trusted him. I loved Jim so much, that's why I married him. I thought he felt the same. So I decided to confront Jim. I thought if I asked him to stop the affair, he would agree. However, why do you think I'm cheating? It happened during dinner. As we faced each other at the table and I spoke up, Jim frowned. Because you've been making excuses to leave the house recently, haven't you? You suspect me over just that? Jim was furious. But at that moment, I felt relieved inside. Jim, after all, wasn't cheating. That's what I thought because I doubted him. I was naive. It's just like you. What? I hate how suspicious you are, Sherry. That's why I started looking at her. Her who? My voice trembled. My heart raced. Could he really be cheating? I leaned over the table. Who is her? A junior at work. She's honest and kind, nothing like you. Jim said, and then his eyes narrowed happily. If I could be with her, every day would be fun. Young girls won't bother with you. I said to myself. Jim is already in his 40s. His income isn't great either. I was a model when I was young. Jim retorted without backing down. True. Jim did work as a model for a short period when he was young. I remember because he boasted about it many times. Indeed, Jim is still tall and hasn't let himself go. His features are well maintained. He could pass for late 20s to early 30s. But at the company, his real age is known. And while I was thinking the impossible, Jim continued. How can I stay with a wife who doubts me like this? Divorce, it's a divorce. He shouted and then pushed a piece of paper at me. It was a divorce application. You're joking, right? I'm serious. Bye, Sherry. With that, Jim went out to the hallway and left the house. Maybe he'd stay at a friend's, or perhaps. Holding the divorce papers, I bowed my head. The next morning, Jim came back early. Perhaps because of yesterday's events, he moved quietly. He seemed to have come to grab his bag and change of clothes for work. Jim. What? When I called out, Jim recoiled as if frightened. To him, I handed a lunchbox. This is. I made a lunchbox. I realized I hadn't made one recently. Please eat it if you like. All right, then. Though there were no words of thanks, Jim seemed pleased. I was satisfied. Good. There's still a chance to make things right. The divorce papers from yesterday couldn't have been serious. That's what I thought. And then, I was dropped to the depths of shock and disappointment. Why? The lunchbox I made was thrown away completely intact in the trash. I had lunch with a colleague. Saying that, Jim sat down on a chair. So, isn't dinner ready yet? How can you say that after you threw away the lunchbox? I couldn't stay calm anymore. You could have eaten it later, at least don't just throw it away. But, you know. Jim said with a wry smile. Your lunchbox is just tacky. Tacky. That's right. It's so tacky I can't even bring it out in front of others. And when I was troubled about it, Hannah. Who's Hannah? I screamed, already understanding that she was Jim's affair partner. She's a junior at work. She makes lunch for me every day. Unlike yours, hers are stylish. So you threw away my lunchbox. Seeing Hannah's lunchbox, I couldn't bear to look at yours. Jim was laughing flippantly, a mocking expression on his face. I was certain. It's unheard of for a mere work junior to make lunch every day. There was no doubt left. It seemed that this incident had emboldened Jim. He began to mention Hannah's name openly at home. I'll be going back to my parents' house this weekend, Jim said abruptly. I tilted my head. Do we have plans this week? Just because. Jim ended the conversation, clearly not interested in my opinion. And on the weekend, when I went to his parents' house, an unfamiliar person was there. This is Hannah. Nice to meet you. The woman called Hannah greeted. She was a charming woman, just as Jim always praised, and definitely Jim's type. Why is she here? I asked Jim a perfectly valid question. To this, Jim responded with a laugh. I introduced her to my parents. She's my new bride. What? I was dumbfounded. A new bride. While I'm still here? Like I said before. Jim continued speaking with a face that said he was in no way at fault. Sherry is too suspicious, and her taste is so old-fashioned. It's like she's not right for me. What is that supposed to mean? I was at a loss for words. What kind of nerve does this man have to say such things? Hannah began to speak, looking apologetic, but then dropped a bombshell. I'm pregnant. I'm finally going to be a father. Jim hugged Hannah happily and laughed. Unconsciously, I stroked my own stomach. I can have children too, you know? Yeah. But if we're going to have kids, might as well be good-looking ones, right? That's why you're not in the running. I had always lived believing Jim's words. Jim had never planned to have children with me. A child with Hannah is bound to be cute, Jim said proudly. Hannah looked troubled as she glanced my way. The mother-in-law who had been watching gave me a sharp look. You don't have any complaints, do you? No. I could only nod. Jim said in a cold voice as I drooped. I wondered how he could have such a cold voice when he was laughing. I'm remarrying with my new bride. Thanks for everything so far. You should get a divorce and leave. My mother-in-law stood beside him with a full smile. The two of them planned to kick me out and welcome Hannah as the new wife. And I was to be discarded. I sighed. Honestly, when they said we were going to his parents' house, I had a hunch. I suspected this might happen. To say more, I had realized it when Jim started talking about Hannah at home. It wasn't going to be long before our relationship ended. That premonition has now become reality. It can't be helped. I had steeled myself because I had prepared a surprise for this day. Taking a deep breath, I said, I'm already divorced, and that woman. What? The room froze. Jim retorted with a strained face. Huh, poor loser. Divorced? You and me? Yes. Didn't you hand me the divorce papers before? Surprisingly, my voice was calm. That's right. Now, I am composed. I won't be fooled by Jim's words or smiles anymore. That divorce application had your signature. So, I also signed my name. In reality, I had submitted it after it was decided we were going to his parents' house. I had resolved that Jim and I were over. Still, I hadn't expected him to bring Hannah to his parents' house. So, you and I are already divorced. Huh? That's convenient then. Right? That's what I thought too, so I took the initiative. As I said this, Jim became cheerful. Good preparation. Thanks, Sherry, for divorcing me. Now I can be with Hannah without worries. You're welcome. Jim thanking me isn't a first. I felt empty. Until recently, I loved a man like this. I really had no eye for people. But Jim was no better in that regard. I can't remarry you. What? Why? Because she's already married. What? At my words, Jim looked at Hannah in dismay and asked her in a desperate tone. Hannah, tell me you're lying, right? You and I have no intention of being with you. Hannah clearly stated. The shock hit Jim and his mother hard. It's understandable since their eagerly anticipated plans fell apart. Why not? Because you were just a fling to me. Hannah still looked troubled, yet her tone was sharp. I said I was pregnant, but I never said it was your child. You assumed too much. I was wondering what to do about it. After saying this, Hannah looked at me. I'm relieved you're such a solid person. No, not at all. I forced a wry smile. It felt like a poorly made comedy. The woman he proudly claimed as suitable had been married to another man all along. I wonder how Jim feels now. Well, I should be going now. Wait, Hannah. Hannah. Jim desperately tried to stop her, but Hannah didn't look back. His mother was so shocked, her dentures almost fell out. Jim was devastated for a while, then glared at me. What's this about, Sherry? I hired a detective to investigate. They told me she was married. And speaking of which, her husband is. Now it was my turn to be cheerful. I told him proudly. Her husband is your boss. No, that can't be. Hannah and the boss don't even make eye contact at work. Jim's voice was desperate, and it saddened me. He never tried this hard for me. They keep it professional at work. I easily dismissed Jim's argument. Jim held his head in his hands. Hannah is the boss's. What will happen to me if this gets out? Don't worry, I said with a broad smile. The sadder my heart got, the more my face smiled. I've already told everything to the boss. What are you doing? Jim looked like he was about to cry. The embarrassment with Hannah was just the beginning. The real show was about to start. My son is the victim here. My mother-in-law spoke in a pained voice. Deceived by that woman, and betrayed by you too. Now my son might lose his job. If that's the case, I was the one deceived by your son. I smiled with all my might, though my lips trembled slightly. I truly loved Jim. I was happy to be married to him. Jim, Hannah, and I had destroyed that happiness. Then. But it's over now. Jim chose another woman. I respect his decision. Ah. As I smiled, his mother eventually collapsed onto the floor. At that moment, Jim's smartphone rang. He checked the caller and turned pale. My boss. Oh, perfect timing. I urged him to answer the phone. Better answer quickly, or things will get worse. Whose fault do you think this is? Well, I said matter-of-factly. It's your own fault. Not realizing you were being played. After all, Hannah and the boss share the same last name. Ah. Jim's face turned even paler. He looked at me several times as if seeking help, but I did nothing. Timidly, Jim answered the call. Boss. You. What are you doing with my wife? Even standing at a distance, the boss's loud voice was audible. My wife is pregnant. And you, knowing that. Hannah approached me first. Jim was defensive, but it was a misstep. Is that so? Boss, I'm sorry for speaking ill of your wife. It's not like that between us. That's enough. Don't ever come to the office again. I don't want to see your face. Boss. Jim desperately continued to apologize, but it was in vain. And the call was disconnected. Like his mother, Jim collapsed on the spot. It's a lie. It can't be true. I wish I could say you're lying. I accidentally spoke my true feelings. I tried not to get emotional, but I couldn't help it. When I was sure you were cheating. How do you think I felt? What do I care about that? Jim spat out. It's your fault for not being charming enough to keep me from cheating. You're so suspicious, and yet you neglect yourself as a woman. It's because you never help around the house. I yelled. I did all the housework alone. I had no time to dress up. I'd rather spend money on living expenses than on cosmetics. That's how I supported our home. Do you understand? It's your fault for not being able to manage your time. Jim still refused to admit any fault. Don't blame everything on me. You only cook plain, cheap meals. Where does the money even go? That's the cooking my mother taught me. Don't speak ill of it. For the first time, the smile vanished from my face. I was genuinely angry. It might have been the first time I ever got angry at him. I had been afraid of being disliked by Jim, never saying what I really thought. But it's different now. We are nothing to each other anymore. I will say what I want. You always say whatever suits you, and then dump all the troublesome things on me. Look at reality for once. What did you say? Stop it. My mother-in-law struggled to stand up. With a pained expression, she pressed her hand against her forehead and spoke. Both of you, just go home. I can't stand any more noise. Mom. Are you abandoning me too? Jim cried out in anguish, but his mother ignored him. I alone hailed a taxi and left his parents' house. Jim and I parted without conceding a step to each other. Feeling gloomy, I called my mother. When I explained the situation, her voice became sad. Jim was such a person. What will you do now? I haven't decided yet. That was the truth. Despite trying not to worry my mother, I kept letting my true feelings slip. Just stay with us for now. In a few days, I'll find an apartment or something and move out. That's not necessary. My mother was concerned about me. You've done enough. Just rest at home, please? Yeah. I decided to take my mother's offer. My sister and her husband were also visiting my parents' home. Sister. Are you okay? You look terrible. I'm fine. From now on, I won't have to suffer anymore. I forced a smile. My sister had just given birth to her first child. Looking at the baby sleeping in her arms and her husband watching them. Tears welled up in my eyes. Sister? Sorry. It's really nothing. Because I'm no longer with Jim. I won't be troubled by him anymore. I'm free. Yet, I can't stop crying. Sherry. Yeah. My mother took my hand and led me to the hallway. Go to your room. I've cleaned it up, it's ready for you. Thank you, Mom. I thanked my mother and headed to my room. As she said, the room was clean and felt as comfortable as if I had been there just yesterday. Despite it being years since I last stayed. Surely, my mother had been cleaning it even while I was away. Overwhelmed with gratitude, I lay down on the bed. The following days were peaceful. That peace was disturbed by a figure standing at the front door. Sherry. You're there, aren't you? Come out. What now? I confronted Jim reluctantly. In just a few days, he looked emaciated. Having left all the housework to me, he couldn't even cook for himself. And judging by his shabby appearance, he had probably been fired from his job. Despite his state, Jim used a sweet voice. Sherry, can we start over? What? That voice once thrilled me, but now it only disgusted me. To think I was deceived by such a man and lived with him. At that moment, I realized there wasn't a trace of feeling left for Jim. Don't say things you don't mean. My voice became stern naturally. Yet Jim wouldn't give up. I want to start over. The thing with Hannah changed me. I won't cheat again. Let's move to another city and start anew. Oh, really? I was astounded. How could he so easily say things he didn't mean? I could see right through Jim. He still thought of me as some convenient housekeeper. That's why he wanted me back. Nothing more. I didn't matter to him. What happened to Hannah? If it's her husband gave her a serious scolding. It ended up that he's not even sure if the baby is his. And it seems she got kicked out of the house. Oh, how fortunate. I said it sarcastically. Now you can be with Hannah, can't you? She was just using me. I can't be with someone like that. Jim shrank back as if he were the victim. Even now, he's trying to use me. She got what she deserved. Besides, she'll probably just deceive another man. Oh, how despicable. I hope she doesn't find anyone. Jim's voice carried a strong sense of hatred. It seemed he'd shifted all the blame onto Hannah. That's why he felt no guilt in shamelessly coming to fetch me again. I'm sorry, but I made my intentions clear. I can no longer live with you. I've come to truly despise you. Don't be so tough, Sherry. You still have feelings for me, don't you? His conceited remark left me speechless. How could he still believe that I harbored any feelings for him? I'm serious. I genuinely dislike you. Sherry. Jim took a step closer and I screamed. Mom. Call the police. What, Sherry? I can't deal with you anymore. We're done. Do you understand? I heard my mother's footsteps approaching. Neighbors who heard my loud voice also appeared, glaring at Jim. Damn it. I'll be back. Don't come back. Jim fled like a runaway. After that, he never showed up at my door again. Instead, he called incessantly at all hours. I want to start over. Sherry, please live with me again. Are you joking? I'm serious. I can't live without you. That might be true, considering Jim never helped with household chores. It seemed like his mother had taken care of everything when he was single. By the way, I remembered something that had me return to the apartment once. Not for Jim's sake, but because I had left without taking my belongings. There, I encountered a man and a woman arguing fiercely. Like I said, I've left my husband, so I'll be with you. Hannah said. Don't joke with me. You weren't dumped, you were kicked out. Jim and Hannah were causing a scene. I was about to turn around and leave when Jim noticed me. "Sherry, you came back." As he tried to approach me with a smile, I stopped him with both hands. "I just came to get my things." "You're saying that, but you must be worried about me, right?" "Oh wow, how self-absorbed can you be?" Hannah, standing behind, was visibly annoyed. Jim turned and snapped at her, "Shut up," then focused on me again. "Sherry, let's live together again. Let's remarry, and this time, it'll just be the two of us. If you come any closer, I'll call the police." Jim faltered for a moment but quickly regained his smile. "Please, Sherry, forgive me. I'll help with the chores and never look down on you again. And of course, no more cheating. Cheating is definitely out of the question. You were just being played." "What?" Jim's face twisted with anger. "Stop it. After all I've said, you're ignoring me?" "I'm not ignoring you. I'm just not interested." "Ha!" Hannah burst out laughing. To her, I said, "Can you really raise a child on your own? That's none of your business." Hannah scowled. The charm and ease she had shown at my in-laws' house were nowhere to be found. "Right." I nodded. "Just let me say this. I couldn't have children of my own, so in a way, I envy you." "Humph." Hannah placed her hands on her hips, her look one of defiance, sizing me up. But really, it was me who should be sizing her up. "That's why I'm worried about your baby. Leave me alone," Hannah said dismissively, stroking her belly. "I will raise this child with my own efforts." "Indeed." I was relieved and smiling. Hannah has issues with relationships, but it seemed she was prepared to be a mother. "That's good then. You don't need to worry about me. See you." Hannah ran off with a brisk stride. Meanwhile, Jim was yelling, "Don't ignore me. Sherry, step aside. I'm here to get my things." "Sherry." Jim tried to elicit sympathy with his pitiful voice, but I sharply countered. "Move." "Ah." Jim flinched and stepped aside. I entered the place I once lived. There was no sense of nostalgia. I simply remembered the layout of the rooms, which allowed me to efficiently collect my belongings. As I stepped out the front door, Jim was standing there, looking lost. I glanced at him and left the apartment behind. I decided to settle down at my parents' house. Being the eldest daughter, I would eventually need to return to take care of my parents. It made sense to get used to living at home again. Now, I help with household chores and the garden. Sometimes my sister and her husband visit with my niece. "She's so cute," I said, smiling, yet I felt a pang of loneliness. Not having children of my own was still a sad fact for me. "Hey, do you remember Kyle, our childhood friend?" One day, my mother asked me with caution. "What's up with Kyle? He's still single. Maybe you could meet him, just the two of you?" "Mom." I smiled bitterly. I knew my mother was concerned about me, but I was tired of marriage. Kyle would be bothered, wouldn't he? With someone like me. That's the thing. My mother leaned forward. "Kyle brought it up when he saw you had come back." "What?" I was surprised. Kyle had always been chubby and frankly not very good-looking as a child. But he was attentive and kind. Now, he was teaching at the local middle school, our alma mater. I don't know. I was non-committal. I was curious about meeting Kyle, but the idea of a setup felt odd. A few days later, I was walking with Kyle in a shopping mall in the next town. "Let me carry your bags." "It's fine." I felt awkward and acted coolly towards him. Nevertheless, Kyle smiled warmly and accepted me as I was. However, he looked different from what I remembered. Kyle had slimmed down and grown taller, giving him a reliable appearance. Sorry, Sherry. I shouldn't have just asked you out suddenly. About that. We took a break at a cafe. After placing our orders, I finally voiced my question. Why did you want to meet me? That is. Kyle hesitated for a moment, then adjusted his expression. With determined eyes, he said, When I heard you got married, I was shocked. It made me realize something. I had always liked you, Sherry. Kyle. An awkward silence descended. It was unsettling but not unpleasant. Feeling attracted to someone felt like a nostalgic emotion. After 6 months of dating Kyle, I married him. While my wedding with Jim had been extravagant, Kyle preferred a quiet ceremony with just close family and friends, which I found appealing. Since my parents' home was nearby, I could visit them almost daily. Kyle was hardworking and beloved by his students. So, one of my students. That must be tough. We shared a laugh around the dinner table, enjoying dishes made primarily from vegetables we grew in our garden. We stocked up on meat and seasonings during our weekend trips to the supermarket. Gradually, our new life's rhythm took shape. Sherry. What is it? Do you ever think about having children? Ah. That made me think. Kyle loved children, and I still wanted them. Yes, I do think about it. That's good. Kyle smiled, seemingly relieved. A year and a half later, I actually had a child. I had hoped our child would resemble Kyle, but amusingly, the baby was a throwback to my mother, which made not only us but also our relatives burst into laughter. Let's take a first letter from your mother's name and call her Christina. That sounds great. Christina, Christina, Kyle repeated our child's name lovingly. Holding Christina, I walked through the garden, Kyle by my side. Peaceful, gentle Kyle. I wondered why I hadn't chosen him sooner. Kyle. What is it? Thank you for waiting for me. Sherry. Kyle seemed deeply moved, his eyes moist as he pulled me into an embrace. Christina giggled happily in my arms. I'm sorry I didn't have the courage earlier. Because of that, you went through so much hardship. It was my lack of judgment. After all, my most important person had been right here all along. Amy, seriously. You took my bag again, didn't you? Just borrowed it a bit. It's too good for you, sis. A brand bag. I saved up to buy that as a reward for myself on my birthday. Lame. Buying yourself a present for your own birthday. Pathetic for a woman with no man, huh? Must be lonely being ugly. I can buy whatever I want for myself. Besides, this isn't the first time you've taken my stuff. Cut it out. The bag looks happier with me than with an ugly sister like you. Give it back now. Stop nagging. You're the older sister, you can spare a bag or two for your little sis. Amy has always been like this, wanting anything I have. Our parents do warn her, but eventually, they settle everything with, you're the older sister. I am Sandra White, 28 years old. After graduating from university, I got a job at a major corporation. Amy, for years my junior, graduated from university last year and got a job. But she spends her salary right away. She never contributes to the household expenses. Our parents tell her to contribute a bit, but they don't insist, so things just slide by. Yet, I often hear, "It's a bit tight this month. Could you contribute a bit more?" from our mom. Reluctantly, I give her the money, and it turns out she sometimes passes it to Amy. Keep it a secret from Sandra. Thanks, Mom, I love you. I've seen this happen several times. I don't bother saying anything, though it really bothers me. Amy is aware that our parents are lenient with her. She takes advantage of that and is good at playing the sweet daughter. She's also quite attractive, which has always made her popular. I don't think I'm that pretty, but I'm not ugly either. However, I was good at studying and always had good grades. My parents would praise me for getting perfect scores, but my dad would say, "But in the end, a woman's looks matter. A woman who's only smart isn't attractive to men." When I frowned, he'd say, "Making that face makes you look even uglier." He might have meant it as a joke, but it hurt me. They were happy when I passed the National University exam, but then said we couldn't afford it because Amy went to a costly private high school. I had to get a scholarship and pay tuition through part-time jobs. Still, when I got a job at a large corporation, they were thrilled. "I'm so glad. To think you landed a job at such a great company. All your hard work paid off, just as I thought my daughter could do it. I always believed you were capable," they said, and it really made me happy. I thought my parents had finally acknowledged me. But Amy went to an expensive private university and just partied. My parents hardly scolded her and kept paying her tuition, despite telling me we had no money. She's just that kind of girl. If we push her, she'll sulk. Mom would say, but I wonder if it's really okay to leave it at that. Despite my frustrations, I've somewhat resigned myself to this being just how our family is. I have a boyfriend. He works for a foreign trading company that does business with my company. We got close after several business meetings and started dating. Within a year, he proposed. And we've introduced each other to our families and are now engaged. The family meeting for our engagement was the first time Amy met my fiancé, Ryan Thompson. When Ryan first came to our house to introduce himself, Amy didn't even want to meet him, saying, "Why bother meeting my sister's boyfriend? He's bound to be ugly." She didn't want to come to the family meeting either and complained a lot. I thought it wasn't necessary to force her, but our parents managed to bring her along. However, as soon as she saw Ryan, her attitude changed. "No way. He's super handsome. And he works for a foreign trading company? How did you manage to snag someone like that? Hey, that's rude." Well, she's complimenting him. Come on, isn't he too good for you? Maybe I'm more his type, huh? Hey, Ryan, why not dump her and choose me? What nonsense are you spouting? Ryan and I are engaged. Stop saying ridiculous things. Ryan seemed not entirely displeased, which worried me. After the meeting, he commented with a grin, "Amy looks nothing like you, Sandra. She's super pretty. Not that I'm saying you're ugly. Just an objective observation." Objective, huh? Yeah. Plus, she's more proactive, or should I say, brighter, easier to talk to. Proactive? What do you mean? I mean sociable. But honestly, if I'm going out with someone, I'd prefer a beauty like her. What are you saying, Ryan? I mean, I never thought Sandra's sister would be such a beauty. She must be popular, huh? Ryan seemed completely smitten as he kept talking about Amy. Since that day, Ryan's behavior changed. He started canceling dates and acted distantly. Something was definitely off. though it's just my speculation. I couldn't accuse him without evidence. Then Amy suddenly bragged. Sandra, I've decided to take Ryan for myself. What? While I was trying to comprehend what she said, I glanced at our parents, who wouldn't meet my eyes. Amy saw that, grinned, and continued. We get along so well. Plus, he's handsome and an elite. It's obvious he's a better match for me than an ugly sister like you. What are you talking about? Ryan is my fiancé. I'm just giving you a heads up. But it can't be helped, can it? If you compare me to you, I'm obviously the better choice. Amy said without a hint of shame, laughing foolishly. I couldn't understand what was funny, nor why our parents remained silent. So, Ryan and I are getting married. Are you kidding me? Don't joke around. But it can't be helped. Ryan and I love each other. And I've already talked to Mom and Dad about it. You're lying. Looking back at my parents, they averted their gaze with a guilty smile. No, that's not possible. A sister stealing her sister's fiancé isn't just some petty theft. This isn't something that should be forgiven. Shouldn't parents be angrier about this? Why are they acting so normal? A flood of emotions overwhelmed me, leaving me speechless with anger and sadness mingling within. Why? Why aren't you angry? Even now, are you still saying because she's your sister? Because you're the older sister? I couldn't help but glare at my parents. Hey, don't make that face. It can't be helped, things have turned out this way. Well, yes. I was surprised, of course. But Ryan said he prefers Amy. It's all about the feelings between the people involved. Exactly. Your unhappiness is because you have a sister like me, a beauty. Just give up on life already. Well, yes. I was shocked too, honestly. But Ryan said he prefers Amy. It's all about the feelings between the people involved. Exactly. Your unhappiness, sister, is because you have a beautiful sister like me. Might as well give up on life now. With that, Amy burst into laughter. See, Sandra, you're the older sister. My mother's usual phrase made something snap inside me. I've reached my limit, I can't endure this anymore. These people aren't my family. Understood. Fine. I'm leaving. What? If Amy's here, that's enough for you, right? But that's troubling. If you leave, we'll have less money for living expenses. We also need money for Amy's wedding. Even if you leave, you'll still send us money, right? Well, you'll do at least that much, right? It's for your dear sister's wedding. Are my parents really saying they want me to pay for the wedding? Of the sister who stole my fiancé? Despite always being asked for more money on top of living expenses since I started working, do they still need more? To these parents, am I just a source of money? Were they happy about my job because they were eyeing my salary? Thinking this, I felt utterly hopeless. Unable to speak anymore, I silently left the room and entered my own. As soon as I stepped inside, I felt so miserable that tears overflowed. I packed my bags while crying. I didn't want to spend another second in this place. I had no place to go, but even sleeping on the streets seemed better than staying here. As I left the room with my suitcase, my parents looked a bit shocked. Are you really going to leave? Let her. If she wants to leave, let her. An ugly sister like her isn't needed at the wedding anyway. But still. Don't worry. Ryan's an elite, he earns well. We don't have to worry about money. Is that so? Well, if you say so. I thought, well, if you say so. What is that supposed to mean? I almost shouted in anger, but it felt like a waste of energy to even get angry. Without any response, I quietly left the house. I stayed in a business hotel for a while. Neither my family nor Ryan contacted me. In the end, that was the extent of my significance to them. Just as I was thinking about finding a place to live, I was offered a transfer to an overseas branch. I accepted the offer without hesitation, thinking it would be a fresh start. Since Ryan's company had dealings with the overseas branch, he must have known about my transfer. Perhaps he was relieved or felt refreshed. After 6 years abroad, I had no contact with my family, and they became a distant existence to me. In the 4th year of my assignment, I married a man I met there. My husband is very sincere and gentle. I didn't inform my family, nor did I feel the need to. At 34, I returned to the US with my husband but felt no desire to see my parents or sister. It reaffirmed that they were practically strangers to me. A month after returning, my husband and I went shopping, doubling as a date. It had been a while since my husband was in the US, so we enjoyed visiting San Francisco. After a day out, we headed to a restaurant cafe run by a friend for dinner. Walking from the subway station, someone unexpectedly tapped my shoulder. When I turned around, there was Amy. I knew it was you. I thought you might look a bit more like an old lady. Amy. Next to her stood Ryan, now her husband, my former fiancé. Seeing his face instantly dampened my spirits. It's true what they say about how unpleasant it can be just to see someone's face. Who is this? Technically, my sister. I had told my husband about my previous engagement and how my sister took him away. Naturally, he didn't have a good impression of them. What? Is this your sister's boyfriend? He's my husband. Really? I didn't know you got married. Weren't you overseas? I came back last month. While saying this, Amy looked my husband up and down as if sizing him up, and smirked. She was still as unpleasant as ever. I could guess what she wanted to say. After all, my husband is quite indifferent to fashion. Of course, he dresses sharply for work, but as soon as he gets home, he switches to sweatpants. Today, he was dressed in a t-shirt and jeans bought from a chain store, fitting for a casual dinner at a friend's place. I too was dressed comfortably in casual clothes. But this relaxed style suits us, and that's what I appreciate about my husband. Smirking, Amy said, "In the end, you married a poor man, congratulations. But at least you got married. With that face, I thought you'd stay single forever. But I guess there are odd tastes out there." What is she talking about? Poor man, is she referring to me? Seems so, I replied, while Ryan, standing next to Amy, began to fidget, probably recognizing my husband. It's kind of funny, you're really suited to each other. A bit poor looking though. Hey, stop it. What? You're being considerate because he's your ex-fiancé? That's unnecessary. If he left you, it's because you're ugly, sis. Stop it, will you? What? Don't tell me you're regretting it now that your sister got married. Shut up, idiot. Ryan yelled and covered Amy's mouth. Amy struggled as if questioning what he was doing. Sorry, she's a bit crazy. And you are? Her husband. That means Sandra's ex-fiancé? But I feel like I've seen you somewhere before. It's your imagination. Well, I must be going now, Ryan said as he tried to drag Amy away, but she broke free from his grip and yelled. He probably thought Amy would join him in laughing at me. But he was frustrated that things didn't go as expected. "Come on, what are you doing?" Ryan said he felt refreshed breaking up with an ugly sister like you. And then marrying such a shabby poor-looking man. You must have gone desperate after I took Ryan from you. This is where you're supposed to laugh. I told you to stop. This man is Junior. What? My husband's company is the largest client of the company Ryan works for. And my husband is the son of the CEO of that company. He's often called Junior, a nickname he dislikes. Besides, it's not decided yet whether he will take over his father's company. My husband is 37 years old now, and there are trustworthy seniors in the company who have been there longer than him. He still has a lot to learn, and his father, the CEO, has said he doesn't put weight on hereditary succession. But my husband greatly respects his father and hopes to be acknowledged by him someday. Whether my husband becomes the CEO or takes a different job, it doesn't matter to me. The man I love is him as an individual, not his job or title. Junior, what? That means he's the son of the CEO of our company's client. No way. Is that bigger than Ryan's company? It's not even close. I knew it. I saw you at the company before. Nice to meet you, Junior. I look forward to working with you. I refuse. What? I've heard about what you guys did from my wife. I don't wish to associate with such people, not even in business. But that has nothing to do with work. It's a private matter, Sweat. Private or not, people who hurt others without remorse or betray trust can't be trusted in business either. My husband retorted, leaving Ryan pale. Meanwhile, Amy was eyeing my husband like a snake sizing up its prey. I guessed she was up to no good again. If I know Amy, she was probably about to act sweet to win him over. Her attitude changed dramatically from before. Wow. I knew there was something special about you. Let's get along well, brother-in-law. Amy tried to touch my husband's arm with a disgustingly sweet voice. But he moved away before she could touch him. Don't touch me. I really dislike women like you. What? How can you say that? I'm way prettier than my sister. Everyone prefers a beautiful woman. You think you're beautiful? My wife looks much more beautiful to me. Ugliness of the heart shows on the face. Compared to you, a chimpanzee is much cuter. What did you say? I thought, chimpanzee. Seeing Amy's astonished face, I almost burst out laughing, but at the same time, I was moved by my husband's words. I knew he meant what he said. He had told me before how tired he was of women who flocked to him just because he was the son of a big company's CEO. Amy's behavior was exactly like those women. I met my husband outside of work, while I was stationed at an overseas branch. On my days off, I often ventured alone to cafes. And it turned out that my favorite cafe was also frequented by my future husband. He always looked so shabby that I thought he must be a jobless person. Or maybe an unsuccessful artist. As we kept bumping into each other. And since we were both American, we started talking. Neither of us disclosed our occupations. And we merely introduced ourselves by our first names. But soon, I started looking forward to meeting him at the cafe, actually. I began going there hoping to see him. There was a genuine kindness in his straightforward, pure eyes. One day, I said to him, "Hey, if you have any paintings, I'd like to buy one." "Oh, but nothing too expensive. Or are you a street musician?" If so, I could promote you. My husband was taken aback by my words and burst into laughter after a moment's pause. I've never met anyone as interesting as you. He wasn't an artist, he confessed, but still didn't mention his profession. Thinking he was indeed out of work, I earnestly offered to help him find a job. He laughed even harder, but we really hit it off. It wasn't long before I encountered him at my company's client office. That's when I first learned that he was the son of a major company's CEO. I was so embarrassed, I felt like I could literally burst into flames. But that day, he proposed to me. I wasn't even officially his girlfriend yet, but I found myself nodding in agreement. How am I worse than a chimpanzee? How rude. Amy must have been furious, her face turning bright red. Wait, were you just making eyes at Junior? It doesn't matter. I'm leaving now. The two of them shouted at each other, not caring who saw. My husband and I looked at each other and laughed. I felt incredibly refreshed thanks to him. Ryan later had a chance to work with my husband, but upon seeing his face, he became flustered and messed up, leading to his demotion. I thought that would be the last we'd hear from them. But a month later, Amy contacted me. Sis, I need a favor. A favor? I need money. Well, actually, give me money. What? Ryan's been demoted to a subsidiary, and his salary has plummeted. He's not elite anymore. We have so many payments to make and not enough money. Why should I give you money, Amy? Because you're my sister. Isn't your husband heir to a huge company? You have loads of money, right, so it's fine. I might have loads of money, but I'm not giving you a single penny. Why not? Your sister is in trouble. You should help, that's what sisters do. I don't think so at all. I've long stopped thinking of you as my sister. You're less than a stranger to me. Don't ever contact me again. Don't say that. You're the only one I can rely on. I don't want to be relied on by you, Amy. We have nothing to do with each other. Goodbye. After blocking my sister's number, I immediately received a call from my parents. It seemed they heard about my husband from Amy. They were being squeezed for money by Amy and her husband, and were now in debt themselves. They were obviously looking for a handout. Just like I thought. I knew you'd snag a wealthy husband. Now our retirement is secure. Of course, you'll help us out, won't you? I was speechless at their audacity. They both kept saying things, but I hung up and promptly blocked them as well. This time for good. I now have a loving husband and in-laws who warmly support us. Since returning to the US, we've been living together with my in-laws. I finally feel like I have a real family. My husband and I cherish our in-laws and look forward to building a warm, loving home together. Why are you here? Don't tell me a high school graduate and poor person is trying to get treated by a doctor? My ex-husband chuckled to himself as if he found his own words amusing. Unmoved by his disdainful behavior, I remained calm. It's none of your business. What a cold woman you are. Just so you know, even at a university hospital, there's no cure for being a high school graduate or poor. Unable to find humor in his poor joke, I didn't laugh. Just then, I noticed a nurse rushing towards us. She waved her hand when she saw us. It's an emergency. We have a patient in critical condition, unconscious. Please come immediately. My name is Mandy. I'm the eldest of 4 siblings and lost my father when I was in elementary school. After his death, my mother raised us alone. But the debt he left made it difficult for her, despite her hard work. I was forced to work at a local factory to help support my family. I wanted my younger siblings to follow their desired paths without financial hardship. So I worked relentlessly. The turning point came when I was 18. After being invited to dinner several times by a supervisor, Steve, from my department, he proposed a relationship. And I also had a favorable impression of him. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and on my 20th birthday, I accepted his marriage proposal. I had told Steve about my educational background from the beginning of our relationship. But he always said, education doesn't matter when you love someone, and strive to treat me as an equal. Although he was older, he never acted superior and always respected me. However, that was only a temporary dream. Over time, Steve increasingly looked down on me. Hey, show some gratitude. Who do you think is making it possible for you to live like this? His disgruntled voice made me tense up. After our marriage, at his strong insistence, I quit the factory to become a full-time housewife. I had planned to continue working even after marriage, but he wanted me to stay home, preparing meals and keeping the house clean every day. I was worried about reducing the amount I could send to my mother. But I couldn't bring myself to resist, so I quit my job. Yet, Steve looked down on me as an unemployed who didn't work and only cost money. Steve, I want to work too. He scoffed at my feeble attempt at protest. Few companies would hire a high school graduate. Just obey me and keep quiet doing the housework. His cold voice echoed. Quitting my job as he demanded was a mistake. The allowance he gave me was gradually decreasing. If I said I needed more money, he would surely blame my management skills. Knowing this, I couldn't speak up and covered the shortfall with my own savings. While watching my husband drink idly in the evening, I thought vaguely about divorce. Fortunately, I'm still young. If I divorced Steve, I could still have children with someone else. He probably doesn't know how much I'm suffering. He must think I'm a stupid woman who doesn't listen to him. Slowly feeling my heart growing cold, I pondered without being able to take any action. As I watched my savings dwindle and endured Steve's contemptuous behavior and our poor marital relationship, I realized this couldn't continue. I repeatedly tried to discuss things with him, but each time, he avoided conversation with excuses like being tired from work or having plans to go out. Eventually, he even started saying, "I don't even want to talk to someone with such a low education." I had reached my limit. After finishing dinner and putting things away, I took out the divorce papers hidden in a drawer. My section was already filled out. All that was left was to bring up divorce to him. Moistening my dried lips, I summoned the courage to speak to him as he watched TV. "Steve, I have something important to discuss." Hearing my tense voice, Steve turned around lazily. Holding out the thin piece of paper, I faced him directly. "I want a divorce." Steve's eyebrows twitched. I braced myself for yelling. However, contrary to my expectation, no shout came. Cautiously checking his reaction, Steve quietly clenched his fists, his face turning red with anger. Yet, he didn't approach me. Perhaps thinking that doing anything more would mean defeat. Trying desperately to control his swirling anger. After a long silence, he growled in a low voice. "A high school graduate like you." His fists trembled more intensely, his angry gaze piercing me. His cold look was chilling, and I instinctively stepped back. "Do you really think you, a high school graduate, can defy me? You don't have any right to initiate a divorce." My husband's voice was loud and intimidating as he vented his anger. Still, I couldn't back down. I had suffered enough at his hands. Holding back the urge to cry, I glared back at him. Perhaps surprised by my unexpected strength, he momentarily looked taken aback. Clutching the divorce papers in one hand, I raised my smartphone towards him. On the screen were messages between him and a female subordinate, which was clear evidence of his affair. While you can't even provide me with enough for basic living expenses, it seems you've been quite generous to her. If you don't need me anymore, then let's get a divorce and set me free. For the first time, my husband was at a loss for words. He apparently didn't know I had evidence of his affair. He must have been overly confident that I would never find out. After a while, unable to find an excuse, and realizing he couldn't talk his way out of it, he laughed defiantly. It's exhausting to live with a stupid woman. I need a break. Without any remorse, he admitted to the affair and turned his back on me as if the conversation was over. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, and I circled around to turn off the TV, bringing silence back to the living room. His sullen face turned towards me. I steadied my trembling legs and presented the divorce papers to him again. All I'm asking is for you to sign this. Please. I couldn't understand why he was so reluctant to divorce. He looked down on me, saying he was tired of living with me and cheated with another woman, yet he clung to this marriage. If he insisted I had no right to ask for a divorce, I was willing to let him initiate it. Public perception and pride didn't matter to me if it meant getting away from him. If you really want a divorce that badly, he said with a sigh as he reached for the divorce papers, then return all the living expenses I've paid you. If you can do that, I might agree to the divorce. That's impossible. Can't do it, huh? Well, that makes sense since you're a jobless and high school graduate. He chuckled deeply, finding something amusing in his own cruelty. Over the 3 years of our marriage, even by the lowest estimates, he had given me over $50,000 for living expenses. Although I hadn't received much lately, it was still a substantial amount that my savings couldn't cover. Almost all of it went to rent and groceries, and I had little to no discretionary money. Despite my best efforts to save, I often had to dip into my own savings to make ends meet. I couldn't accept his absurd demand, and I felt darkness closing in. He seemed to enjoy laying these impossible conditions on me, watching me struggle. Then, a small flame of resolve lit up within me. I wanted to prove him wrong. My determination solidified. I'll pay it all back, I declared firmly, meeting his gaze. He half smiled, clearly thinking I couldn't possibly manage it. But that was exactly why I had to do it. Can I have some time, though? And I'd like to settle the divorce first. You wouldn't want to keep living with a woman who might take your assets, right? He seemed uncertain of my intentions for a moment, but then hastily signed the divorce papers without much thought and handed them back to me. It's just an empty promise you can't keep. Don't spread this around. It would ruin my reputation. With those selfish words, our marriage abruptly came to an end. But I felt no despair. I was fortunate to be only 23 years old. As long as you're young, you can do anything, my mother always said. I quickly packed my bags and left the house without a second glance at my husband. Dragging my suitcase, I boarded an express bus home. The next time I would see my husband, everything would be dramatically different. I reaffirmed my resolve as I watched the urban landscape flow by outside the window. 12 years later, I found myself standing bewildered in the lobby of a university hospital. It was my first visit, and the vast grounds had me completely lost. I tried to ask for directions, but every staff member seemed too busy to care about a lost visitor. I spun the map in my hands, trying to figure out where I was and where I needed to go. Could it be Mandy? Suddenly, a man's voice called my name from behind. I turned around, startled, to find a man who looked to be approaching middle age. I felt I had seen his face somewhere before but couldn't place it. "Excuse me, but who might you be?" As I asked apologetically, the man sighed deeply and looked down at me. "Oh, come on, does a high school graduate also have bad memories? It's unimaginable to forget someone you were married to." Hearing that, I took a hard look at the man's face. Memories slowly started coming back to me, particularly his condescending gaze. "Steve." Having been addressed by name, Steve settled into a chair in the lobby with a satisfied air. Prompted by him, I somewhat reluctantly took the seat next to him and observed his face again. His hair had thinned, and his face had aged significantly. Most notably, the trim figure he once had was now flabby and his belly protruded. 12 years had indeed changed him. "You recognized me quite well, didn't you?" "Well, of course, your face hasn't changed at all, and you're still ugly." His casual insult didn't faze me. I was too weary to make a fuss about it. My lack of reaction seemed to disappoint him, and he scratched his head disinterestedly, letting an awkward silence hang between us. What did he want by speaking to me? Surely, he couldn't possibly remember the promise from 12 years ago. He adjusted his graying hair and then looked at me with a sly grin. "Why are you here?" "Don't tell me a high school graduate and poor person is trying to get treated by a doctor?" He laughed at his own joke. I remained unaffected by his demeaning behavior. "It's none of your business." What a cold woman. Just so you know, even university hospitals don't have a cure for being a high school graduate or poor. I couldn't muster a laugh at his poor joke. Just then, I noticed a nurse rushing toward us, waving her hand. "Mandy, we have an emergency. The patient is unconscious and in critical condition. Please come right away." I immediately stood up and took a lab coat from the nurse. Steve stared at me in disbelief. "Thank you for your support on your first day after transferring. There are no other doctors available right now." The nurse ushered me away quickly, leaving no time to pay any mind to Steve. I handed him the map I'd been holding, as I didn't have time to dispose of it properly. He watched me, eyes wide, unable to grasp the situation. As you see, I became a doctor. After dealing with the emergency, I was due to enter the consultation room. It was still before the official start of my shift, but wandering the hospital alone, I'd likely get lost again. I reviewed the medical chart and gasped when I saw who it was. Steve, too, widened his eyes in disbelief upon seeing me in the examination room. According to the chart, Steve was suffering from a heart condition and had been referred to the university hospital. I immediately composed myself and returned to my duties. Steve, seemingly dissatisfied, did not attempt to hide his sour expression. "Any questions before you leave?" I asked routinely. "How did a high school graduate become a doctor?" he muttered under his breath. The nurse behind me looked at him with a puzzled expression. I hesitated for a moment before responding. "My father was a doctor. It's not that I was not intelligent enough to attend university." I remembered my father vaguely. He was always busy with work, rarely home, and squandered most of what he earned on alcohol and hostess clubs, even accruing debts. Yet, I was grateful for his passion for education. without which I would not have become a doctor. I had always believed, since I was aware, that I would be a doctor like him. I never struggled academically through elementary and middle school. Even in high school, and my mother was always pleased, confident I could become a doctor. After my father passed away, I had to start working. But I continued to study diligently, and eventually applied to medical school. But you couldn't have afforded university. My mother saved all the money I sent home. There was also a scholarship program. A scholarship? You. His demeaning tone almost got to me. But I quickly regained my composure and glanced at his worn-out face. You always underestimated me as a stupid high school graduate. But you just never noticed. His face contorted with displeasure as he glared at me. A nurse whispered from behind that it was almost time. I put away the chart and prepared to call the next patient. Then, as if remembering something, I looked back at him. Oh, as for the living expenses you wanted me to repay, I can pay them back now, and double the amount. I earn more than you do now. His face flushed a deep red. I had chosen my words carefully to crush his excessive pride. Although his anger visibly bubbled, he managed only to stand up. With a loud noise in the examination room, which was a public space visited by other staff. What is this, a quack doctor? I'll file a complaint against this hospital. With that disjointed parting shot, he stormed out of the examination room. Left alone, I exhaled deeply, releasing the fatigue. Despite the weariness, I felt oddly refreshed. Eventually, Steve chose to seek treatment at another hospital. But he was advised there as well to return to the university hospital where I worked. When he came back, he looked uncomfortable. After our divorce, the woman he had an affair with had left him. And rumors of his infidelity had spread throughout his office. The affair and our divorce had become public, forcing him to resign. He had been abandoned by both women, damaging his pride, increasing his drinking and smoking, which had led to his heart condition. I felt a slight pity as he faced a major surgery. But considering how he had treated me during our marriage, I couldn't find it in me to forgive him. Of course, his treatment was a separate matter, and I carried out my duties professionally. We still see each other occasionally during his checkups. At one point, he even suggested we try again, but I politely declined. I have no intention of marrying anytime soon and am happily living with my family. It might sound strange for me to say, but as a doctor, my reputation is quite good. And I earn enough to support my mother and siblings. Amidst my busy but fulfilling days, I sometimes reflect on that fruitless marriage.